So we're going to have a look at probably the most... It's so salty, it's unbelievable. So we're going to have a look at health impact news, and the guy doesn't put his name forward except the health impact news editor, so I'm guessing it's the main guy that runs this site. And he is upset, to say the least, that Snopes.com have proved that claims that he has made on his website have been proven false. So I'll leave a link to the article below so you can read it, but I'm going to pick out some of the quite literally fantastic points, and you can read it for yourself, but this is ultimately amazing. So his first gripe with them was that they released an article about the ALS Ice Bucket challenge, and that all this money that had been raised wasn't going to, you know, the things that had been provided. Now, basically, their article basically says that about 74% of the money was instead going to, like, people's salaries and basically other things, anything except ALS research. Now, they claim that they had looked at the published records from the ALS charity's website, and that this proved it. This was the smoking gun. Say, look at all this money being spent and blah, blah, blah. Well, Snopes looked into this, as they do, and they prove it to be false. Again, follow the link that this guy has posted to the Snopes link, to the Snopes site, and it will show you that it's wrong. Now, what's he so salty about? He got proved wrong on this, basically, 100%. So his two main points in this is, this is not a claim that... He claims that this is not the claim that their article made, but again, if you follow the link to his article that he wrote about this, that is the claim that he is making. Note how they added the word services to research, because that's what they also spent the money on as well. They're not secretive about it. Like I say, these are in their published accounts, and yet again, a lot of it did go to research. Again, only a couple of months ago, there was a big story about all the money that got raised has helped fund a possible breakthrough into ALS. So again, does this guy update his website? No, but he is there, and later on he certainly does complain about the fact that Snopes.com update their articles and change their information. You know, how dare they want the people to be accurately informed? So they did not reference our article at all, but rather collected via email. So this guy doesn't understand how Snopes works. One of the things that Snopes does is invites people who come to their website to submit questions. And one of their questions that was collected via email was, hey, there's a claim going around coming from your article and other, you know, natural news websites who were highly against this, saying that, you know, 74% of the funding from the Bucket Challenge wasn't going to research, and they looked into it, they found it false. Now, this guy goes on to be even more salty. He claims, he says that, they used second-hand information on Charity Navigator, and that because they used Charity Navigator, that somehow disproves the fact that they showed that you were wrong making this claim. It did disprove it. They did use secondary information. There's nothing wrong with using secondary information to back up your claim. And yet he goes, oh, but we used the actual things, and you know, and basically the salt, it's unbelievable. So his next problem with them is the CDC whistleblower story. Now this gets absolutely hilarious, because he says, "Oh, we made this claim, but then they said this is the claim they proved false," which is the exact same thing as what he is saying. And again, it's like, what? No. What? And again, he has links to the Snopes.com article that show, you know, he is wrong. He is making this claim, but yet somehow it's not the claim, not the wording in he puts it. So somehow it automatically invalidates everything. It's unbelievable. So he claims that they're making this, they've set up this straw man argument, which again, they haven't. He also claims that because they collected it via email, which they haven't, in that article in particular, again, follow the links to the Snopes.com article, you will see that it's not collected via email, this one. This is all the information from some of the articles he's linked himself, they used to prove that he's wrong. So again, what? This is unbelievable. The real kicker, though, is this part. I'm going to read it to you. So, the Mickelsons, the people who run Snopes, use many other common fallacies of logic, often deployed in debate, particularly debates on the internet where one side of the argument is not heard. They include ad hominem attacks, personal attacks against people's character who as opposed to refuting facts. This is sadly a common technique used in the mainstream media where Dr. Andrew Wakefield is used as a scapegoat and attacked for anything deemed anti-vax. It is sad to see the Mickelsons resort to this low level of attacks when clearly Dr. Andrew Wakefield, a British physician, he's not anymore by the way, has nothing to do with the research and fraud at the CDC, which is the real issue here. In the Snopes.com article, Andrew Wakefield is only mentioned once because Brian Hooker brought the CDC whistleblowers' information to Andrew Wakefield. He then published it. That is the only mention of him in the article. They do not use ad hominems against him. Again, someone show me in the article where Snopes.com attacks Andrew Wakefield. They do not attack him in that particular article. He's mentioned once, and they do not attack him in any way, shape or form. So this is the other one that's quite funny, because they do attempt to deal with issues and primary sources. Dr. Thompson's statements from his attorney and Brian Hooker's published study reanalyzing and omitted CDC data. They correctly point out that the Journal of Transitional Neurodegeneration has raised concerns about Hooker's study. It was peer-reviewed and accepted for publication prior to Dr. Thompson going public as a whistleblower. That's not the case. They published it, and in a journal it gets peer-reviewed. They pulled it because they found out that, hey, things had not been followed and that ethically they couldn't publish the study because there was a lot of problems in how the statistics had been published. Where are we? But they also failed to mention that the study is still active, available to the public on the National Institute of Health websites in the public domain. Why is that relevant? the study where it was initially published had pulled the study. You can still find Andrew Wakefield's study outside the Lancet where it was pulled. So I'm confused how to seeing this. Using personal attacks and name calling, which they don't, they offer no explanation as to why Hooker's analysis of the formerly hidden CDC data is not correct. They do, actually, but instead list as their source for the flawed and misinformation as a blog post by Dr. Gorski of Wayne State University, who is a popular internet apologist for the vaccine industry. He's not an apologist, he just has facts on his side, and unfortunately to these people, facts are inconvenient things. About 90% of what Dr. Gorski writes is inflammatory personal attacks against anyone who dares oppose the holiness of vaccines. And yet he's, only a couple of minutes ago, wasn't he saying that using personal attacks was bad? And I'm getting a use of, what's the word, hypocrisy from this? So, I noticed that the Mickelsons did not link to a specific blog post. They do, actually, which they used the exact quote. But here's an example of the kind of language Dr. Gorski uses in his attacks. Now, this is quite funny. This is really quite funny because up to a point, this is correct. However, the guy who wrote this article added on something to make this look like he's attacking it. Now, you can again go and look because again he links the source and gets the source wrong. So I'm going to read, this is his source, this is what he says, Dr. Gorski says. If there is anything that ignites the fevered brains, such as they are, of anti-vaccines, it is a good-seeming conspiracy indeed. We've seen before. If they can't find a legitimate one, they either exaggerate one or make one up whole cloth. This week, an alleged conspiracy has been brewing. It really is the damnedest thing in it that it is hard to figure out exactly what is going on. Whatever is going on, though, I would recommend extreme skepticism, because two people involved are those whose word you would be very foolish to trust on any scientific matter regarding vaccines: Andrew Wakefield and Brian Hooker. A partial transcript can be found at where else the wretched hive of scum and villainy the wretched hive of anti-vax scum and villainy, Age of Autism. That's what he says. Dr. Gorski actually says. Now, let's follow the source, shall we? If there is anything that ignites the fevered brain, such as they are, of the anti-vaccines vaccinists, it is a good-seeming conspiracy. Indeed, we've seen it before. If they can find a legitimate one, they either exaggerate it or make it up whole cloth. This week, an alleged conspiracy has been brewing. It is really the damnedest thing. It is hard to figure out exactly what is going on. Whatever it is going on, though, I would recommend extreme skepticism, because two people involved whose word you should be very foolish to trust in any scientific matter regarding vaccines: Andrew Wakefield and Brian Hooker. It began with a paper published in another journal I've never heard of, the Transitional Neurodegeneration, and accelerated. Now, all of a sudden, you'll notice something's missing. Yes, that's right. The point where he said, a partial transcript can be found at where else? A wretched hive of anti-vax scum and villainy. Why has the author added this? I want to know, because that doesn't appear in the original source article that he is quoting. So now he goes on to basically start bashing Dr. Gorski, and so basically he goes on to say that Gorski has admitted that he's not in the area of medical specialty. Medical specialty does not include neurology or autism. So you have a go at Dr. Dvorsky for the fact that, and apparently this should discredit him from commenting on, vaccines. So why then is Andrew Wakefield a credible source when he was a gastroenterologist? His speciality had nothing to do with vaccines, nor does it have anything to do with autism. So again, laughable, 100%. Now, the next and final part he goes into is he goes on about the HPV vaccine and how the CDC supposedly is not a credible source for information. Well, what's his reason for the CDC not being a credible source of information? Well, this is according to him, in his own words, one of the most damaging pieces of news to come out against the credibility of the CDC in recent years is the criminal activity of one of their top vaccine researchers, Dr. Paul Thornton. Thornton was charged with 13 counts of wire fraud, 9 counts of money laundering, and a federal grand jury alleges that Thornton stole over $1 million from autism research funding between 2004 and 2008. Now, they're basically saying, oh, this guy committed fraud. But one thing he didn't do was he didn't publish any false information about autism. He didn't publish any fake false information about autism. And the third thing, he didn't publish any false information about autism and their links to MMR vaccine or any vaccine that they seem to want to choose at the time. This is not it doesn't bring any credibility, to his argument that the CDC is not a valued source of information. That's, if Dr. Thornton had published, let's say, false information about a link, say, between MMR and autism, and the CDC had published this information as being true and accurate, and let's say the flip reverse was happening, then yes, the CDC might be a less credible source for information. However, that has not happened. This is, again, what he's been saying. This is a straw man argument. This guy is an idiot. He is so salty the fact that he's been proven wrong on all these three things. And I'm going to leave a link to the article so you can read it yourself. And the fact that he posts link again to Snopes, the people who he's trying to disprove and discredit, and the fact that everything he says in this article is Snopes does prove that his claims are false. He doesn't provide any more information to back up that his claims are true and that the ones provided by Snopes are incorrect. He then says that somebody submitting a question via email and them using that information that was submitted to go and disprove that information that was collected via email is somehow something wrong to do. He's annoyed that that they use secondary information. Secondary information, by the way, he's used in this article technically as well. So why is it wrong for Snopes but somehow right for you? He's gone and alleged that they use people like Dr. Dvorsky, who are, yes, he doesn't have specialty in vaccines, but he does have the medical knowledge to disprove and debunk the fact that, a lot of this anti-vaccine nonsense is complete nonsense, and yet you use this argument against Dr. Dvorsky, but then some reason when your exact same argument applies to Andrew Wakefield, well, it's perfectly fine for Andrew Wakefield to get a free pass. And then the final one is he goes after the CDC and says that because there was a guy who committed wire fraud, somehow the CDC are not a reliable source of information. That doesn't disprove the fact that the information the CDC has put out is wrong. This guy is so salty. He's upset about the fact that he's been proven wrong, and he's been unable to prove that he's been wrong. Now, if he'd been going on these things and saying, well, actually there's this information that Snopes hadn't included in their article, or the fact that there's this information that they hadn't included which invalidates the rest of their article, then maybe he might have a point writing the article. However, he doesn't. Remember this whole CDC whistleblower thing? It starts off listing the information that Snopes.com has already listed, and then they go on to say in the Snopes article why that's wrong, and that instead of trying to disprove why they've said that's wrong, he goes on this whole rant about the fact they're using personally attacking Andrew Wakefield. He's only been included once in the article, and they basically said that Brian Hooker had given the information to Andrew Wakefield, who we then published on his website. That's the only time they mentioned him. This is awful journalism. This is awful debunking of trying to say that you are somehow right. The article is 100% hypocritical in the fact that he applies his skepticism to one side of the argument which he doesn't like, but his side of the argument for some reason just doesn't get a look in. If this guy wants to come and have a talk with me, I'd be more than welcome. I'd be more than love to come and have a talk with this guy. Please do share it to this guy's YouTube and Facebook. Please do. I'd love to have a talk with this guy. But yeah, health impact news, not making an impact, and it's certainly not news.